One is the seminal British blues great who launched the careers of Eric Clapton, Mick Taylor, and Peter Green. The other is the 25-year veteran of the Swedish band Killer Bee. Our guests are John Mayall and Anders Rönnblom on the VVN Music Podcast. Hi, and welcome to episode 27 of the VVN Music Podcast. I'm Roger Wink, and this week we have a double show with guests John Mayall and Anders Rönnblom of Killer Bee. John Mayall's music career started in the mid-50s with the band The Powerhouse Four and led to his becoming a member of the Blues Syndicate in 1962. A year later, John moved to London where he formed the Blues Breakers, which also included future Fleetwood Mac bassist John McVie. Over the next 5 years, a series of guitarists would come through the group, including Eric Clapton, Peter Green, and Mick Taylor. Others who passed through the ranks of the Blues Breakers included Andy Fraser, John Mark and John Almond, Harvey Mandel, Walter Trout, and Colo Montoya. Mayall just released a new studio album, Talk About That, the 66th of his long career. We talked to John from his home in Los Angeles. Thank you so much for talking with us. Where are you located? Are you in Los Angeles?
Yeah, that's right.
You a permanent resident of the U.S. now, or?
Yes, since 1968.
Well, thanks again for talking to us, and congratulations on the new album.
Yes, I was really happy about that.
You just got back from a Rock Legends cruise. Those things have gotten to be huge in the last few years. It must be really tough to be a musician and have to put up with such a tough job.
Oh, well, there's nothing tough about it, really. I mean, it was quite pleasant.
How many shows did you do while you were on the cruise?
Every band did 3.
And the cruise was, what, a week long?
4 days. It was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Yeah, 4 days. It was very well organized, yeah.
Your new album, Talk About That, was released on January 27th. I believe that this is your 66th album. That is truly an amazing legacy of music.
I know, well, it keeps on rolling along.
I also think this is your 4th studio album since you dissolved the Blues Breakers. What was your reason for doing that after so many years of having that band? Well,
it's just a case of it was kind of getting... It was kind of getting in a rut, really. It wasn't really moving along the way I wanted it to, and I think the rhythm section was definitely on the getting very tired. I just wanted something more with a bit more life in it, and I think it was the right move. And Greg Arzab and Jay Davenport have proved to be a sensational rhythm section, and we get on so well together. It's a real happy situation, and I think it shows in the music too.
You know, what's impressive about the new album is the breadth of different styles of blues music that you cover.
Yeah, well, that's always been putting an album together. I don't want any of the tracks to sound the same, so I want it. You start the album off, and each song has a different character and a different instrumentation and a different focus. So that's always been my aim to, keep people surprised track to track.
The track on the album, The Devil Must Be Laughing, must seem a bit prophetic right now in light of the events of the last week or so.
I know, because we recorded it probably about 9 months ago. I can't remember, but anyway, it's certainly coming true, isn't it?
Joe Walsh guests on that track and one of the other ones on the album. How does his participation come along?
Well, we were only in the studio, to make the whole album for 3 days, which is the normal thing to do. And on the second day, we got a word from the studio manager that Joe Walsh wanted to come and play a couple of tracks on the album. So he came by, and I wasn't sure what to expect, but it worked out very well. He was only in the studio for a couple of hours, and that was it. So it was a very, very happy contribution, and we all got on well together.
It's my understanding that he came in, listened to the basic track, and put down his guitar in one take.
Well, there wasn't a basic track. He just, we just played it. So he didn't add anything on. He just played with us.
Who else do you have guesting on the album?
He's the only one.
You did bring in a horn section though for it, correct?
Well, the horn section, I usually use a horn section on certain tracks, yeah. But I mean, that's what I always do. So they were the same guys who were on the previous album, so it was just like old times. They just came in for a day and nailed it.
I really love the New Orleans sound on Give Me Some of That Gumbo.
I know.
How did that track come about? You wrote that, correct?
Yeah, it was one of the ones that I wrote, yeah. Like I say, when I put an album together, I want to make sure that each track has a different flavor to it, and, I wanted to capture the flavor of New Orleans, and I think the contribution of the horns really added a distinctive flavor to it, and it was funny because they were having such a good time. They were making little vocal noises in the background, so it was a very happy occasion.
You wrote 8 of the 11 tracks on the album, and looking back at your last few albums, that's actually a much kind of a higher total than what you normally do. You must have had a lot to say this time around.
Well, there is that factor involved in it, but I think it's if I have enough subject matter that I can write more songs on the album, then I will do it, of course. So it's just the way it turned out.
Your albums always have covers of great blues songs on them. How do you go about choosing what tracks to cover?
Well, I think the main thing is if they're going to be suitable for Greg and Jay to relate to, So it's usually a no-brainer, really. I think if I choose a song by another artist, it's because I think that they can identify with it and make something of it.
You are obviously extremely intuitive in finding the best of the best to work with throughout your career. What is it that you see in a musician that makes them stand out above all of the rest out there?
Well, I think the main thing that I always have believed in is that people, the musicians, should have a good time and express themselves properly, and so that's really a very simple premise, but it's always seemed to work. I pick the musicians for their individuality, and hopefully they'll all get along together, which is the key to it all.
You do, though, you have had a lot of people come in through the band and so forth. Do you like to change it up fairly often?
No, not really. I think it's a myth that's grown out of the fact that when I first started out in England, with Eric was only in for a year, and Peter Green, was also only in for a year. So there was a constant changeover in the early days because everybody was so young and they were trying to find their own feet, so to speak. But in recent years, my bands of personnel have probably been together longer than most bands on the planet. So I think that the previous band was together for 15 years, and the lineup before that was 10 years. So, I think, like I say, it's something that people kind of think that I'm changing bands all the time, when in fact it's the opposite.
You recently, though, went from a 4-piece to a trio. What prompted that decision?
Well, it was accidental in a way, because Rocky Athos, who lives in Fort Worth, Texas, there was a close down of the airports, and he couldn't make the gig, so we had to play as a trio, and out of that we found a lot of new things to do, and it sparked my interest in taking it a step further. So there was another instance where Rocky couldn't make it, and it kind of cemented the thing that it was something I wanted to try. And ever since then, of course, without an electric guitar, the interplay has become much more focused, and I think it's one of those things that came by accidentally, but has proved to be a great success.
Is this one of the only times in your career that you've worked without either a co-lead or a supporting guitarist?
Yeah, it is, yeah. It's the first time.
Your career obviously has been all about the blues and its many, many various forms. What was it about the music that resonated with you?
I don't know. It's very hard to explain, but I think the music shows my devotion to the music and the fact that I can find it as an outlet for what I feel.
When did you first hear the blues over in England? Was it something that was readily available, or do you have to seek it out?
Well, the idea that this all started in the 60s, is kind of stuck in people's heads. But in fact, I started collecting records in the late 40s, and so it's been with me most of my life.
The Rolling Stones just put out their album that kind of returned them to their roots, and it's been a huge hit internationally. Have you heard the album, and what did you think of it?
Yeah, I bought it not too long ago, as soon as it came out. But it's very refreshing. I think it's nice, good. It's not only good for them to have had a go at doing that, but I think it's brought young listeners, new listeners to get the first taste of what the blues is. So, and usually when somebody very prominent, like the Stones or anybody else who gets into the hit parade, it does a good job for the music in general. So we all benefit from a high-profile act coming into the picture. Speaking
of young listeners, is there anybody on the blues scene that really, really impresses you at the moment?
Well, there's so many of them. It's really hard to pick anybody out, really. But I think the fact that the blues keeps regenerating all the time is a very healthy sign for the music in general. You were inducted last year into the Blues Music Hall of Fame, correct? Yeah. That had to have been quite an honor. Yeah, it's one of those things you get along the way if you're lucky. So it's very nice to have. I think the real question is, when is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame going to get off their high horse or whatever they're on and induct you? Well, they are on a high horse, and I don't live in hopes. But one of these things, you never know what's going to happen. But to my mind, they when it comes to blues, they are a bit slow. True, but I mean, when they talk about one of their criteria being influence on other artists, I don't know how they can pass you by. I don't know either. It's been puzzling me for years, but anyway, it's out of my control. You have a really extensive tour of Europe coming up with 47 shows over 2 months. How do you keep going at that pace? Well, we like to work every night, and we have such a great time playing. It's not like most bands, but most bands on the road, they play the same songs every night in the same order. So I always feel that must get kind of like a machine, But I have my band and my outlook is the same as jazz musicians, in that we play different songs. We have a repertoire of live material, which is about 40 songs right now that we're playing, but it's a different show every night. I make a new set list every night, so there's never a set list that's the same. So we always have a great time exploring and communicating that with the audience. It's got to keep you fresh, and also if you have fans who happen to see you multiple times on a tour, it's also got to be more exciting for them to hear something new every night. Yeah, when we did the cruise, for instance, we had 3 shows and they were completely different from each other. So people who came to the first show, they enjoyed that one, and they came to the next one, it's a completely different set, and then the third one, again another set. So, they got a good helping. I know that right now you are working on promoting the new album and you're going out on tour, but any thoughts for what's next? Yeah, well, the next thing, we've done the studio albums, and this trio thing is working out so well. I think the live performances are really going to be something that to capture, because it's been a while since I did a live album, and that's what the next plan is. So while we're in Europe, we'll record a few live shows and pick the best out of it for a late year release.
Throughout your career, you've done many live albums. Is it that you're feeling that has a totally different feel to the music from when you lay things down in the studio?
Yeah, the studio albums and live albums are so different from each other, and they both have their advantages that make them separate from each other. But I think a live album captures, the risk taking and the fact that you can't once you play that note, it's there. You can't change it. So I love studio recordings because you can shape something on a permanent situation. But like I say, live albums are what they are. So if you capture that in the recording, you capture the audience reaction. I think that's another great asset.
When you do live albums, do you do any kind of correction later in the studio, or do you feel that the live album should stand as it was played that night?
Yeah, well, you can't change it. I wouldn't dream of changing it. You just go with what happens.
I have talked to some artists that have said, well, if the vocal was a little off, we'll tweak it here and there, and to me that kind of takes away from the excitement of a live album. Yeah,
no, you got to go with what it's a risk to actually record something, because once you're conscious that you are being recorded, it kind of is a bit of an imposition that gets in the way of total freedom. But if you can just put that out of your mind when you get on stage and just do what you always do, that's the secret of it.
Well, best of luck with the new album. I really appreciate you taking a few minutes to talk to us, and I hope the tour goes well for you.
Yeah, always does. We're going to have a lot of fun as usual, and keep spreading the word, and we'll see what happens.
Our thanks to John Mayall for talking with us. His album Talk About That is available now. We now move to Sweden for a conversation with Anders Rönnblom. Anders and his fellow songwriter Brian Frank first met in Toronto in the mid-'80s, but it wasn't until 1992 that they officially joined forces to form the band Killer Bee. During their original run, the band released 3 albums and toured Europe with some of the biggest names in music, along with doing major shows in Red Square and Olympic Stadium in Moscow. Their single, Take Me Home, also did well in Europe, topping the charts in Norway. After a decade-plus hiatus, the band reformed in 2012, releasing a series of albums including their late 2016 set, Eye in the Sky. Anders talked to us from Sweden. I've read that Eye in the Sky took a couple of years to make, but you also had these other albums out. Were you working on this on and off throughout that period?
Yes. We started the recording process with Eye in the Sky 2014 in PI. So we were actually supposed to release that album in the fall of 2014. But unfortunately, there were a lot of mishaps coming in between there, and management wanted us to come and play in the States. So we have started to focus on going to the States in May 2015, which we did. And there was an album called Rock Another Day. That's a greatest hits from Hell and Back and Evolutionary Children. That was put together just for the U.S. market, U.S. radios. It was journalists, producers, musicians that picked their favorite songs, and they decided which songs would be on that album. You cannot get a hold of it in Europe, for instance, unless you get a hold of it like on import. It was just for the U.S. So that was just a thing for the U.S. before that month we were gigging in the States. And that tour led to the tour with Guns, so with Tracy Guns and Rudy Sarso and Bullet Boys in July in 2015. So when we got back from all this, we continued to record it, because what happened during that period was that the guitar player that was on the first recording, he left due to family issues, and Paul Chapman from UFO, Paul Tonka Chapman, joined the band. So he was with us on the tours. So he recorded new guitars, and also the new guitar player, Andre, the young guy, he also did new guitars on top of it. That's what happened with the whole recording process. So we took away the old guitars and added Tonka Chapman and Andre on the guitars on the album.
You mentioned touring the U.S. Do you have any plans to come back this way, once the album, is picked up more over in the U.S.?
Absolutely. Somebody has whispered in my ears that we actually going to play in, let me see, is it 17, 18, or 19th of May, or 18, 19, 20 of May, together with Y&T in Seattle, Portland, and then we're going to do one show by ourselves in Lewiston. So that's what we know that's in the tube right now. And there's some other plans as well, but I cannot confirm anything unless it's down on paper with everything. But, of course, we're planning to come back to the States. The
title song from the album seems to be very apt right now in the world, because you're talking about constant surveillance and everything.
Yeah, actually, if you listen to the song Joystiq Warriors, well, it's about this kid sitting at home and can actually play with a drone. It's all about, it's a little bit political, what's going on, and Brian is very keen on his lyrics and that, so it's very important for him to bring out those messages.
Your sound is based very strongly on 70s and early 80s hard rock. What made you and Brian decide to go in that direction? Was that just a love of yours, or?
Yeah, but that's what we was brought up with. That what Brian, he's early Bowie, Alice Cooper, Aerosmith kind of guy, Zeppelin, and I grew up with early Kiss, and then it was Michael Schenker Group and Rainbow. That has been my inspiration, and Iron Maiden, all these early records, and some Yngwie Malmsteen, his earlier albums. So we have never actually said that, okay, we're going to go in a certain direction. We've always done what we just feel that this is us, this is where we feel comfortable. We just do it our way. And Brian, who's producing the albums, he's always been a huge fan of Bob Ezrin. He's worked with Alice Cooper and that. So we just have that analog sound and the Hammond, the purplish stuff that's in the songs as well.
The thing that struck me with all of your catalog, but especially with the latest album, is just how melodic it is, where some harder rock doesn't tend to rely on good melody and good hooks in their songs. That's something that you guys do wonderfully.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we always said, people say, Anders, what kind of music do you like? And in particular, I said, music with melodies is what I like. Where I can hear a melody, I like the music. And, I mean, like I said, I listened to the early Michael Schenker, the early Rainbow. I think you can probably see where I'm coming from.
Yes. You met Brian while you were playing in a band. I guess you were on tour in Canada, and you met while you were playing in Toronto, correct?
Yeah. We went over to Toronto actually to find us a singer, because we couldn't find anybody in Scandinavia, in Sweden, and we got a hold of a guy that he was very influenced by Rob Halford. He was a great singer, but there was he had some stolen equipment, and he got taken by the police, but we decided to continue. So we went into a studio called Sound Kitchen in Toronto. It was actually the studio where Rush did their pre-production of Permanent Waves, and we had the chance to listen to those songs when they were there. So it was like, wow, that was absurd to hear all these things. And they said, we know a singer, So they called Brian. He came in and listened to the songs. He laid down 4 tracks. And we stayed in touch. We went back to Sweden. Brian came over for 2 weeks, 87. We kept on talking to each other, but out of the blue, we just called each other basically on the same time. He was on his way to call me, and I called him, and he just moved over to Sweden in 1990. And here comes the fun thing with Facebook and things, is that about 2 months ago, I read an article about Rush and the pre-production of Permanent Waves. So I decided I remember the name of the engineer guy in the studio. I was looking up the studio, couldn't find it, didn't exist anymore in Toronto. But I found the guy on Facebook, tracked him down. Believe it or not, the tapes that he saved from that studio are the reels with the band and those recordings. And the name of that band we had was called Firewind. Do you know the band called Firewind with Gus G? His band is Firewind. So I got those recordings now sent to me. So we're planning to release those those songs actually later on some special edition or something like that. We see what we're going to do, but it was surreal to hear the songs after 31 years. Is it 31 years? Yeah, 31 years.
Yep. It was still 5 years, though, between when he came in and laid down those 4 tracks with you, before you actually permanently got together, let's put it that way, and formed Killer Bees, right?
Yeah. We had a band together first called Desert Rain, and we did an album and did some shows, and then we formed Killer Bee from there.
After 3 albums and 8 years together, the band took a hiatus that ended up being actually a 12-year hiatus. What happened that precipitated that?
Well, we did a lot of touring in Europe, and we had some management in from Switzerland that put us on great shows, great festivals. Everything was like, it was on the second album, Cracked Up, great reviews. A lot of things were happening down in Europe, and all of a sudden there was the police was there, and there were problems with hotel bills and etc. The guy has left. He left us there stranded with everything, and we managed to get out of the country, and we decided that we need to take a break. So we basically separate ways on the airport. But Brian is still living in town, and we always been in touch with each other. But we decided, I was in touch with Brian, and then I said to him that it was 2011. All our songs and everything we did in the 90s was physical records, and now everything is digital. So I said, let's release everything digital, and just so we get it out there, so we can make a closure at least. But when the albums came out, and there was so much interest around the band, so all of a sudden we have recorded a new album, and there comes the second one, and it was the greatest hits, and here comes Eye in the Sky.
What did you do during those 12 years?
What did I do? I got myself a bartender degree. I got a degree through British Airways, that I can open up travel agencies. I just were skipping around. I took a driver's license. I was driving huge trucks. At the same time, I was just playing as a troubadour with an old friend of mine. Then I was pretty fed up with playing other people's music, and so there we were back in where we are right now.
Your band is truly pretty international. I mean, you have you from Sweden, and you have Canada. I believe your new drummer is from Britain, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
No, he's from Los Angeles.
Oh, is he? Okay.
Yeah, Sean Duncan.
But you are from all over the place. Have you? When you do record, do you all get together in one place, or are you doing what so many bands are doing, which is, recording in their separate geographical areas and then sending files? No.
We do them together. Let's say we start with the rhythm guitars and the drums, and we're not sending files in between each other unless there's something that has to be redone. But I mean, the basics and everything, we always been together when we're doing them, always getting together, because that's the way it should be, right?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I mean, you think about some of these great soul artists and so forth in the 60s that, you know, they would be in the room with the horns, with the rhythm section, and just recording in a few takes. And, yeah, I think you get a much better sound that way.
Absolutely. You get a more live sound to it. And we've always been saying, and that's one thing that we stick in, it's very hard to, is that we always want, what we sound on an album, that's what we're going to sound live. Because we don't want to do a lot of stuff on the albums that we cannot perform live. So that's very important. If you record everything, because the drums and the bass, I mean, if the bass are right on with the drums, it's a keeper. Same thing we're trying to do is just get, we don't do any overdubs or things like that. We just, boom, get things down and get it as much live feel to it as possible.
Tell me a little bit more about the rest of the band as it is now. I mean, you and Brian have always been the core, and you've had different people in other positions. Who else do you have with you now? Well,
as we said, we got Denny DeMarchi on keyboards. Denny's been with us since we made the comeback in 2011 with the first studio album, so he's been on all of them. We got the new drummer, Sean Duncan, who's played with Odin before. They have it on site in DC4. His brother is actually playing the guitar, I believe, in Armored Saint. We got Andre Hägglund, is a rhythm guitar player, he's 28 years old, and his old teammate, Chris Sjöström, also from Sweden. Two extremely talented guitar players and great singers as well.
You know, in your 20 years together, you've, as you've already mentioned, seen the industry go from, you know, analog to digital. You've seen the media go from CDs to digital downloads and now to streaming. With all the changes, how hard is it for you to now get your sound out to the fans as you did in the past?
It's easy to get out, but it's hard to get heard because it's so much. It's so much. The flow of music is absurd. To be honest, I was shocked because from we took the break 98 to 2011, 2012, and I started to get looking up things. I went, oh, this is a great band. Never heard about them before. Oh, they've been around for 8 years. They were like, okay, I've been away. Sorry. So the flow of the music that comes out is like, I was totally shocked how you saw the media. I mean, you got all the web scenes. When a label released an album before, they had ads in the magazines, September release, October release, November, and all the big artists, remember, they always want to do the December Christmas releases. But I mean, you never see that anymore. You never see any of these advertising in magazines. The paper magazines are not existing. And I used to say that if you got an ad or an article in a paper magazine, a music magazine in the 90s, 80s, 70s, you could basically live on that article for 3 to 6 months because the magazines came out every third week or every month or so. But now, if you're going to have an ad to have the same potential, you basically have to have, as the internet flow is, you basically have to have an ad on every page because it's such an instant information flow all the time. It's like click, 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 and it's like news, and there's so many new bands. So there's like no way you can as a hard rock fan try to keep up with all the releases. There's so much out there, and I can understand it's easier to get a release out because you can get it out to the digital services faster than you could have it pressed in the past. But that's also made it easier for everybody to do it. To draw a parallel, I don't know how it is in Sweden now, but here in the U.S. and the television industry, there used to be 3 networks that would make about 85 series a year. Now with what we have, I heard last year there was just short of 1,100 different television series that were made in the United States. I don't know how anybody's supposed to rise above the din unless it's just lucky. Yeah, it's impossible. And I can say like this, if we haven't had our past, you and I wouldn't have this conversation right now. our past was actually our foundation to come back because we had something to write about. We made a comeback, we did this and that, we did the Red Square Moscow with all the touring in Europe with all the big festivals and had the releases, and there was a fan base out there. So I always been saying that that made it easier for us. And what we have done, what I learned and picked up really fast was that now when the guys are in North America, in Canada and America, and we're in Sweden, we need to keep a momentum up because we cannot go out and tour on weekends because we cannot fly in between each other. So we were starting to do videos. We did videos to keep a momentum all the time, and new releases and things were happening, and tried to work with the social media as much as possible, just to keep a flow of following everything. So, keep your nose above the level, so you won't drown in all the flow of the news from everything else. And I think we've done pretty good with that. That's been very persistent to keep everything rolling along. Because, I notice as soon as you slack a little bit, you get passed right away. Woof, somebody's just passing you.
You've been very successful in your own home country and around Europe and so forth. In the United States, not as much. Have you been frustrated by the amount of work you've had to put into breaking in the United States?
No, absolutely not. Just as you know, there is like we spoke just a minute ago, how the extreme so many releases that everybody can put out the release, that you're drowning in it unless you are a well-known band as Aerosmith or U2 or you Shinedown or all the bridge, and then they've got the big machinery behind them. But they've been around for a while. They are not newcomers, and you see the big dragons, they're still out there. And to get into this, you have to, as I say, come from the top. Don't try to climb, take it all the way from the bottom and up, because it's all about contacts and right time, right place all the time. And actually more frustration, I would say, is that we have more interest in America than we have actually in Sweden. Because we were based in the 90s, we were based in Switzerland, so we did all the touring in Switzerland, Germany, Austria, went to Russia and went to Norway, for instance. Those were the territories that we were concentrating on, and Luxembourg and that, but not so much in Sweden. We did some shows in Sweden. Yes, there's been an interest, but compared to what we've done, you would assume it should be more. But look at Yngwie Malmsteen. He was never a prophet in Sweden. Has never been. ABBA, the same thing. Roxette, the same thing. A lot of In Flames. They're doing pretty good in Sweden. But you see, it's like it's very hard to break in Sweden unless you're singing in Swedish.
Now that I think about it, you had one major number one record, and that was in Switzerland, wasn't it? Norway, okay, that's right.
One single, yeah, Take Me Home was number one on the radios there, yeah.
But it wasn't in Sweden, and I just, when you mentioned that, I happened to think that you're right. I did read that it was somewhere else.
Yeah, and the thing is that with that song did really well in Norway, and we made a video for it. But that video, it was during the MTV time period, and that video is very graphic. So it was totally banned from TV stations. It's called Take Me Home. If you go out on YouTube, now it's very, it's graphic. But so unfortunately, it was never shown on TV.
Hey, I do have to ask you, what's the fascination with clowns on the last few album covers?
Good, actually. To make a long story short, I went through a rough period myself before I had to come back. I was struggling with personal shit, and when I came clean, I realized that we are born originals but die as copies. If you ask somebody, say, how are you doing? And they go like, I'm doing fine. But then you ask them again, okay, but how are you really doing? We wake up and we put on a mask and you go out and meet people. You see a clown, he cries behind the mask. And then it's been a little bit, it looks a little bit tougher and more evil than it was meant in the beginning. But the clown thing has actually to do with that we are trying to uphold the face. We always have to have our living standards. We don't have any problems. We are in physical good condition. We whine and complain when we have no Wi-Fi. But there are much more things to think about than bad Wi-Fi connection, right?
You're obviously right now riding the wave of the new album and all. Have you had any thoughts about what the follow-up will be?
Follow-up on the album? What do you mean?
As far as where the band goes next and next albums and so forth.
Yeah, well, I'm right now. I just put the guitar aside here. Just in the working process with writing songs, I got like 12 new songs already, and it will be the same kind of songs, melodies, groovy riffs, 70s, 80s, organ. We put in a ballad, we see what we feel like, and then we see if we keep the clown or if it's going to be in the background. But the thoughts and the political thing will always be there.
Well, I want to wish you best of luck with the new album and with your future endeavors. I really appreciate you talking with us.
Thank you very much for having me, and looking forward to hopefully see you sometime.
Killer Bee's album, Eye in the Sky, is available now from major retailers and digital download stores. We'll be back next week with another edition of the VVN Music Podcast. Remember that you can hear the VVN Music Podcast via Iheart Radio, YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, Libsyn, and the VVN Music website. For the latest news on the veteran artists of rock, pop, soul, country, folk, and blues, go to vvnmusic.com. If you have any comments or questions about the website or this podcast, please send them to vvnnetwork@gmail.com. Our theme music is performed by Iheart. This program was recorded on February 5th, 2017, and is a production of the VVN Network, copyright 2017.